Hey Giants, welcome to 12 Journeys Coaching. We're going to be talking today about the 12 journeys of developing your inner giant. This will be a live training. I won't be bringing anybody on screen, but you can comment throughout. So if you have questions, thoughts that come up, they help me to kind of gauge where to go with this. And we'll go for about an hour today. This is broadcasting live on 8 different channels. So on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, I think it's on Twitter as well and Twitch. I don't even know what Twitch is, but it's out there. So you can come back and catch the recording. It'll put it on our YouTube channel and go through this as often as you'd like. But my goal and vision with this is to give you a framework to work with to get your mindset where it needs to be, that you can start envisioning the skill sets that you'll need to develop and start envisioning your world the way that you want it to be, and then create your legacy so that you can thread that through everything. And so the vision is that when you do your inner work, then that leads to the creation of your outer world. And that's my hope with the Giant's Journey, is to teach you how to do that. And so this entire program is designed around that. I'm going to pull up on the screen here and turn off my branding here so we can see the full screen. So feel free to comment throughout, and we're going to dive in. We're going to go pretty quickly through this over an hour. So it's quite a bit of information. If you have a notebook, go grab that, because you'll want to capture not necessarily what I'm sharing, but what comes up inside of you as you hear this information. So 12 Journeys originated from the book, The Giants and the Smalls, The Adventure of Remy and Rit. I wrote that book back in 2009 after going through my own difficulties. I still go through struggles just like all of you do. But in 2009 in particular, I was starting over. My home was foreclosed on. I was in bankruptcy. I was getting food at a food bank. I just felt at the low of lows. And so I started looking to my mentors and the processes that they used to create a giant life, because I felt really small at that time. And so I created the book, The Giants and the Smalls, and got that launched and published in 2020. And then about a year and a half into that, in 2021, 2022, these 12 journeys started emerging from that book. And so that's what I'm teaching here, are the 12 journeys that you can find in that book, The Giants and the Smalls. The first 6 journeys that we're going to go through are the root journeys. So in this logo that you see here, the 6 roots that you see on the bottom are the 6 internal journeys that we've got to go through to get our power back. Because when we get our power back, then we can go into the growth journey. So the upper 5 branches on this logo are the growth branches. So this is where we jump into vision, abundance, uncertainty, nurture, surrender. Those are things that are going to help you create your vision in your world. The lower root journeys are all about creating your self-empowerment, so that you can get your power back so that you can see your vision properly. And you'll notice there's just a single fruit on here. The fruit is the legacy journey. So the legacy journey is designed around purpose. It helps you to know kind of what your reason is for doing all of this, your reason for getting up in the morning, your reason for creating. I wonder what time it'll be in Australia if it's live. It's going to be, I think, pretty early in the morning. So I'm going to read these comments as we go. Hey, Lori, good to have you here. And we're going to dive in. So we're going to start with the root journeys. The first 6 journeys are all dealing with the internal work. So we're going to start with the journey of unconsciousness. It actually should be non-consciousness, because unconscious means you're out, you're knocked out, you're not here, you're not present, you have no say. It's kind of the unconscious stuff that goes on within your body. Non-consciousness is a level above that. So non-conscious is that I can automate it and I don't have to think about it, but I could still pull it up if I need to and work on it. So there's a distinction between unconsciousness and non-consciousness, and I might change that in the program here. But our goal is automation. So everything that we are able to do, our goal is to be able to automate that so that we don't have to think about it. Alfred North Whitehead said that civilization advances by extending the number of important operations which we can perform without thinking of them. And if you think about that, we have things that we do automatically that are useful, and we have things that we do automatically that are not useful. And so the brain doesn't care. It's indiscriminate. It has the ability to store a lot of information. And it also automates it. It's designed to automate it so that we don't have to think about things, so that we can do more things. I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain structure. I'll try not to nerd out too much on this, but you truly do have limitless capacity for anything, whether you want to do good with it or negative with it. It doesn't matter. The brain will support it. Each of us has about 86 billion neurons. Neurons are the nerve cells that fire communications or information through the brain so that you can do the things that you do. It's where all your thoughts come from. It's where all your memories are stored. It's where all your actions are. In addition to that, you have what are called glial cells, and the glial cells are more of the support structure. So when you fire a neuron initially, it's going to fire really slow. It's going to search out its path. It's going to make the connections. Initially, it's going to be very clunky. The glial cells, their entire job is to support something that you've automated. So as you do something over and over again and you habituate that, then these glial cells come in and they support that to make it fire more efficiently. You have about 85 billion of the glial cells. And so all the gray matter that you have in your brain is made up of both neurons and glial cells. You have over 1,000 synapses per neuron. I mean, you think about that, 86 billion neurons, up to 1,000 synapses per neuron. You literally have limitless capacity. I mean, if you think about your brain, anything you want to learn, anything you want to do, you could do it. Your brain has the ability to do that. In this system that's created, we have about 50,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. There's enough room in there to store 1 million gig of information. You could put 3 million hours of TV in your brain. That would be 300 years of watching TV 24/7. I mean, it's a ton of information that you could put in your brain. So there's really no limit other than the stories that we tell ourselves around our limitations. And that's where we start to see those. You have over 100 trillion atoms in the brain, and you have 700 trillion synaptic connections. So that's where all your perceptions are, your memory, your thoughts, and your actions. And so those are all stored in there. And so too often I hear people say that they just don't have the brain for it. They can't do what other people can do. Truthfully, we all have a similar structure. And even if you had a portion of your brain removed, you'd still be able to function at a high level. There was a young lady who at 3 years old started having seizures. They couldn't figure out what was going on. They took her to the hospital. They figured out that the right side of her brain was eating itself up. So it was consuming itself, causing seizures. So they ended up removing it completely, the right side of her brain. And then the left part of her brain took over all the functions that the right side used to do. So with half a brain, she was able to graduate college, get married, and live a somewhat normal life. So there really is no excuse to create yourself the way you want to be. What gets in the way is that we have all these automations. The brain is trying to make sense of things. So as you're working in your environment, it's looking for things that maybe there's some gaps. It wants to fill in those gaps. This is a Cambridge study. And if you can read that, let me know in the comments there if you're able to decipher that. But our brain has the ability to rearrange that and put it in any order it needs to make an understanding of it. And so our worlds are created inside of that brain. So we start having our perceptions, right? This is kind of the process that I see it as, is that when we're born, we start to develop our brain. Most of our brain development happens after birth. And so we're handed this culture, we're handed this story that says this is how we do things. We're told what's right and wrong. So we start to establish these proto values that are given to us, and they become foundational to our beliefs. So what we think about the world, how it works, how we choose into it. And then we start to predict our world from those beliefs and those values and that story. And then we speak from those predictions, and then from those words come our actions, which we begin to act on, and they create results. And then we have outcomes, and those affect our perceptions. So I don't know if you can see that there. And then we repeat those outcomes, and they become habits, and then we feed that back into our story, and then we dive and create our own version of values and morals and beliefs, and then we start making predictions from there. And so that is kind of the process that our brain uses. We make sense of our world by the perceptions that we have. And so when we have those perceptions, we start to see the world working that way, and we start to predict the world working that way. And then we speak it in and act on it and habituate it. And those become our automations. So getting back into the idea of automations, this is how we create those. We start with what's handed to us, and then we add to it, adopt, we change, we transform, and then we create our own version of habituation and pass that on. In human experience, if you look at this tree here at the bottom, we have our protocultures that are given to us. So the value systems that are given to us. On top of that, we stack our own value systems, and those become the foundation for our beliefs and perceptions. When we have those beliefs and perceptions, those start to affect our thoughts. Those thoughts then generate our emotions, and emotions are generally where we act or don't act from. And so based on those thoughts and emotions and beliefs, we start to develop a purpose. We have behaviors and words and actions, and that creates the fruit of our life, basically. When somebody else has an emotion and it's coming in or coming at us, or there's an external event, then we use our perception to block out anything that doesn't fit our story. So I call it the sensory perception filter. Sometimes that comes externally, sometimes internally, and our perceptions decide what gets through. So you'll notice that there. So these perceptions block what's allowed in, whether it's internal or not. So we might not see what's going on in our world completely because we've created a story that it works a certain way. And so we start to automate around that, and that becomes our reality. So we get confirmation. And in that confirmation, we start to act and believe that the world operates that way, even though there might be evidence that says otherwise. So I love these. I wanted to get these comments in here too as we go. So I'll do my best to stay on top of these. So essentially, we're creating our reality. We're creating our reality through our automations and our behaviors. And the challenge is that if those are unuseful and they're not helping us, then we really get this perception, this belief system that the world is hard, that it's not easy to get through it, that things are challenging. But the reality is that we can transform that. If our brain has been programmed a certain way, we have the ability for our entire life to learn any kind of behavior, to create a mindset that allows us to adapt to anything. I'm going to dive into the next part here. So there are three levels. We have our conscious, which is what we're aware of. We have our preconscious or subconscious. I would say that that's going to be more of the non-conscious. These are things that you do without thinking, but if you needed to, you can bring them to the surface and work on them and then put them back into the automation. Then you have the unconscious, which is going to be, let me go back here. The unconscious is going to be the stuff that, like running your heartbeat, your heart rate, any hidden traumas that are buried in there that are maybe affecting your behaviors that you don't know about. You're not able to access them. Those are things that I would put on an unconscious level. And what we want to do is try and bring things into that preconscious, subconscious range, that non-conscious area, and then move them toward consciousness so that we can work on them to the point that they become automated again in a more useful way. So we're able to reprogram them and then plug them back in. And so the biggest challenge people have is that their automations kind of get in the way of them being able to do that. And so William James says that we must make automatic and habitual as early as possible as many useful actions as we can. The more of the details of our daily lives we can hand over to the effortless custody of automatism, the more our higher powers of mind will be set free for their own proper work. And so that is the goal. I mean, the goal is automation. The challenge is automation. The unconsciousness is the first stage. It's really hard to do anything when you don't know it's there. It's hard to change a behavior when you're not even aware of it. And so that's where it's important to jump into the journey of awareness. So awareness, this is a challenge because when you become aware of things, we're going to move into a space where we may not know how to navigate that. You're pulling back the covers basically on your life. You're no longer allowing the automation to run. In fact, I think it was Carolyn Leaf who said that we gather attention, we gather awareness, which means to pull it back into us. So we pull our attention back into us and we take back the reins, we pull back the covers. And the challenge is that when we do that, we might be aware of something, but we haven't quite yet developed the tools to do anything with it. So as we look at the journeys here, we go from unconsciousness automation, which is the goal and the challenge, and then we move to awareness. And now we know that that thing is there, but then we've got to figure out what to do with it. How do we work with that? So until you work with that, until you do something about that internal automation, any skill set that you add to that is going to be like frosting dog poop, right? Until you deal with the inner stuff, the mindset, the way of being, then any skill that you put on top of it isn't going to be very effective because of what's operating it. It's like putting bad gas in the car or running a phone with an uncharged battery or faulty programs. And so our primary responsibility is to start doing that inner work. The challenge that I see with many people is that when they become conscious to their unuseful behaviors, they go to a really dark place. They get sad, they feel overwhelmed, they feel like they can't do it, they feel depression, loathing, they want to do self-harm. They get into a very judgmental space. And this is where there's an opportunity to create room for whatever automations you have, whatever programming you have. Now we know that you can program anything you want into your world. And when you become aware of the things that aren't serving you anymore, then you can change it. But the challenge is that instead of allowing room for it to be what it is, we often move into the judgment of what is. So we become very hard on ourselves about what's present. It's not okay. I should know better. Start saying things like that. When we move into a judgmental space, we feel insecure. Sometimes we feel superior to others. We start comparing. We start thinking, how am I doing compared to somebody else? We get jealous. We are unforgiving. We're critical. We become perfectionistic. I mean, think about perfectionism and flawlessness is this idea that if I do it just right, I'll get approval or acceptance. So we're really hard on ourselves. If we're not doing it properly, then we really judge ourselves like that. Valuation and worthiness, pity and isolation. There's an external locus of control. I don't have control. It's outside of me, right? We're very reactionary when we move into the judgment space. So everything that we want in our world, around that automation moves out of our control. So we don't feel like we have a say. And the goal is to move into an observer space where you're more curious about the automation. You're more curious about the non-conscious behavior. You have compassion for it. You have empathy. You're more calm. You have positive affect or emotion toward it. You're a little more forgiving and neutral, so it doesn't impact you as much. You satisfy. Satisficing is the idea that it satisfies the need and is sufficient for the task. It's from Nobel Prize winner Herbert Simon. And it's an efficient way to get things done. We move into acceptance and grace, and we take on an internal locus of control, and we're very mindful about our unconscious behaviors, our non-conscious behaviors, and our ability to do something about it if it's not serving us. And so the observer space is really where we want to move to. If we're in a judgmental space, it's really hard to do anything because we don't have a say. And we're very angry that it's even present. We don't want it there. And we spend our time fighting it, even though it's present. And so moving away from judge to observer is going to be a huge step when you move into awareness around your automatic behaviors. Here's the other thing. You can always justify your behaviors. So you're only always justified in your perception of the world. Your truth is your truth. So there could be two truths at once. One person will have one truth and another person will have another truth. And those two truths are true to those people, even though they're different. So we start to justify our automations. We start to justify our judgments, right? And your judgments are your truths. And our goal is to create some room for that. So we want to get honest with it. Honesty is simply ownership. That means I know it's there. I own it. I take responsibility for it. I'm accountable for it. And I believe I can do something about it to shift it. That's honesty. We think honesty is telling everything, telling all the truths that you hold. You don't have to do that. It's just owning what's going on within you. It's mine. It's mine to do something about. We're not looking outside of us for somebody to come rescue us from that way of being. Brene Brown, she says, you either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness. So this is really owning our story. It's owning our perceptions. It's owning our value systems. It's owning our belief systems. It's owning our behaviors. It's a way to really have complete ownership of everything that's going on in here. Instead of looking outside of us, if this person would do this thing, then I could change. It's removing all of that. It's returning it where it belongs and bringing it back in here. Thank you, Julie. The idea here is that we want to own our internal journey. We want to own everything that's going on in here, because it's from here that all creation occurs. Who we are being creates our world. And so it's up to us to change that, to not look outside of us for that. Byron Katie says, as long as you think that the cause of your problem is out there, as long as you think that anyone or anything is responsible for your suffering, the situation is hopeless. It means that you're forever in the role of victim, that you're suffering in paradise. If you could hear that last part there, you're suffering in paradise, and it's because you don't have control over what's going on in your world. You perceive that you don't have control over what's going on in your world. And so in the journey of awareness, the way to change it is to start asking empowered questions, expansive questions from the observer space, of getting curious about why you do what you do and where it came from, and if you want to keep it around. If it's a restrictive question of why am I always doing this? Why am I broken? You're very judgmental. It's hard to grow from that space. In the story, when I wrote this into the Giants and the Smalls, I had the character ask these expansive questions because I wanted him to express this idea that questions help us open up to possibility. Questions help us to see things that we might not be seeing. Whereas if we get very judgmental in our questioning, we start to restrict ourselves in what we're seeing. We start to justify our position. And instead of doing something about our automations, we just go unconscious to them. We numb out to them. We plug them back in, and then we become the victim of our lives. And our goal is not to do that as a giant, which this brings us to the next journey, which is the journey of grief. If you look at these internal journeys, this is what you'll go through. You'll go through automations, and then when you become aware of it, if you can move into the observer space and not the judgmental space, then you'll move into often grief. And I find it interesting that grief is part of the journeys because it often deals with loss. It deals with ideals, right? Rumi said that joy lives concealed in grief. And I would imagine most people don't want to feel grief. They don't want to feel sad. They don't want to feel depression. They don't want to feel anxiety. They just want to feel positive all the time. But there is a power and a healing that occurs in grief. It comes from the Latin word gravare, which means to make heavy, to cause grief from gravis. It's weighty. And when you come to a consciousness, often there's this grief that is associated with it. There's this heaviness. And where I often see it with my clients is that they had this ideal of where their life should be. Like I should be further ahead, or they start comparing, right? They go into the judgment space and they start comparing. And then they're really hard on themselves and they feel really heavy because they're not where they thought they should be. So we're not necessarily dealing with the loss of a life or a relationship. We're dealing with the loss of an ideal of what we had in mind. The grief cycles tends to run one of two ways. When it deals with death or dying, we go through denial and anger and bargaining and depression and then into acceptance. So at first we're like, this isn't happening. This can't be happening to me. And then we get mad about it. And then we start to beg that something will happen. If I do this, will you take it away? And then we get depressed, and then we move into acceptance. When it comes to breakups, we move into a shattering. Something happens and our world is shattered. We withdraw. This is from Susan Anderson's work. We start to internalize and look at all the ways that we might have created that. We go into rage. We get angry, and then we lift. And I'll have you notice that anger is a part of both cycles, right? Anger is just a secondary emotion to sadness or anxiety. It's meant to get us to move. And it can be part of the healing process. Now, it doesn't mean we want to stay in anger. That can be pretty damaging. Lori, thanks for sharing that in that right now. not where I think I should be. Yeah, that's pretty common. We have these ideals of where we should be in our lives. And then when we don't measure up to that, we feel a loss because there's a gap between where we are and where we think we should be. And here's the beauty of that loss is it tends to move us into a space of depression. And I think depression is actually a useful tool. And here's why. It causes us to resign. It causes us to pull back. It causes us to reflect on our world and start to look at our behaviors and activities and the things that we're doing. We really start to see reality as it is. So we have, instead of this delusion or this vision of where we're going, we start to see reality as it is. And if we can move through depression, we can have a reverence and a respect for it, from which we can re-engage in a new direction that's more powerful. Same with grief. When we pull back into that internalization, and then we start to have a reverence and a love for it, then we can re-engage in a new way that's even more powerful for our lives. And the quicker we can move through that, that's called resilience. And so we learn to do that quicker and quicker so that we're not stuck in the cycles of depression. The challenge is that most people don't want to feel their emotions, so they numb out, right? They don't want to feel it, so they avoid it. And then they feel the effects of it, and they're just constantly depressed, never coming back and re-engaging in their lives the way that they could. And so grief is a normal process in the healing cycle. It's just, we're going to wake up. We might have some judgments. We might have some grief around what is versus what we thought should be. And then we'll move into the next journey of acceptance, which we'll talk about in a minute. Lisa Feldman Barrett, she's one of the top researchers on emotions right now. She says that numerous experiments showed that people feel depressed when they fail to live up to their own ideals. But when they fall short of a standard set by others, they feel anxious. So notice that we think we know what others are thinking, and then we judge ourselves for that. Brad Blanton says the stress that kills or cripples most of the population comes from people being too hard on themselves when they don't live up to their own imaginings about how other people think they should behave. And I don't know if you can hear that, but we imagine what people are thinking and then judge ourselves from that. And then we feel depressed or anxious because we're not measuring up to something that we made up here. And so that's where our distress comes in. It comes in from measuring up to our own ideals or not measuring up to the ideals we think other people think we should have. And so it's kind of a paradox. It's a little messy. And so this is where we get a chance to move into the journey of acceptance. Acceptance comes from the Latin word acceptare, which means to take or receive willingly. Acceptance in the words of Carolyn Leaf means to gather back in, to bring back in, to pull back your power, to receive willingly again. Acceptance in the words of J.P. Morgan is that you can accommodate things and you can allow for things. Allowance means it has ticket to be there and it has permission to be there, and accommodation means it gets to move in. I like using the analogy of a bear in the field. So you're driving down the road, you see a bear in the field, and the bear has permission to be there. It's a wild bear. It's out in nature. I mean, it's just doing bear things, does what it does. But you're driving down the road and you say, it shouldn't be there. That bear shouldn't be there. So I'm going to do something about it. And so you go out in the field and try to shoo the bear away, but the bear doesn't want to move because it's just a bear in the field. So you end up fighting the bear, and we all know how that goes. You lose the fight with the bear because bear's way stronger than you are. And so you fight this bear in the field when, if you were driving down the road, you could have had some allowance for that bear to just be in the field. It's not comfortable maybe to you, but it's not doing harm to you. It's just simply there. And a lot of times with our emotions, we just need to create room for them to be there. We don't have to fight them. We don't have to get rid of them. A lot of times when we do that, we lose ourselves to them and they win, when acceptance just creates room for them to be present. And so that's what we want to do with our emotions. Paul Tournier says that acceptance of one's life has nothing to do with resignation. You're not resigning to your life. You're just recognizing that it is what it is. Doesn't mean running away from the struggle. On the contrary, it means accepting it as it comes, right? Life is what it is. What's going on in your world is happening. That's what's present for you. And that's okay. Jan Le Vincent says that acceptance does not mean agreement, nor does it mean we feel good about what we're facing. It means that we're willing to look for and embrace the lesson. It also indicates a willingness to grow through the experience. So we're able to see what is, we're able to create room for what is, to be what it is. And that embracing of it, that allowing of it, allows us to grow in ways that we never imagined. So when you move from that unconsciousness to awareness through the grief and you move into acceptance, now you're moving and creating a space for change to start to happen. Okay, so it gives you room to allow whatever's going on in your world to be there while you create it differently. We're not going to chase away anxiety or fear or depression or any of these things. We're going to allow our stories, those emotions to run while we create it differently. So the best way to escape from the past is not to avoid it or forget it, but to accept it and forgive it. And my favorite definition of forgiveness is to not cause additional harm. And so that's all we're doing, is we're giving ourselves room for what's happening. It's okay. I forgive it. And by forgiveness, more than anything, we're forgiving our judgments of ourselves around what's going on in our lives. We're forgiving the judgments that we have about ourselves, and we're stopping the harm that we cause to ourselves by our idea of what should be happening in our lives. We're forgiving ourselves for the judgments that we have about what we think other people think and the judgments we have around those. And what that does is it creates room for something new to come into your life. Steve Maraboli says letting go isn't about having the courage to release the past. It's about having the wisdom to embrace the present. We're trying to get you back here. We're trying to leave the past in the past. Let it be what it is. It is what it is. We can't work there. All we can work on is right here. So our goal is to get you present, and acceptance does that, which moves us into the space of gratitude. So the journey of gratitude is about recognizing the good in your world, right? It also comes from the word gravity, right? Or gravis, right? Kind of the same idea, weightiness, but in a positive sense. You think about your past life and it has some weight, right? It's like this world here. Your past way of being is like that. Your new way of being is like the moon. There are going to be times where you're pulled back in to your old way of being. Acceptance allows that to happen. And then simply, when we notice it, we move back into acting on the new behavior. Gratitude helps us do that. It's one of those tools that helps us to move forward. It's an emotion. And if you think about emotions, emotions are not reactions to the world. They're your constructions of the world. Emotion is your brain's creation of what your body sensations mean in relation to what's going on around you in the world. Emotions always follow thought. And thought follows your perceptions and value systems, which come from your way of being, who you think you are. And so that becomes your mindset. So your mindset creates your thoughts. They say soul, your soul creates your thoughts create your emotions impact your activity. And then it's from there that you act into the world and create your results, which creates your perception again and feeds your history and feeds your habits. And you become the person that you see today. So our goal is to transform that. If we're going to change it to something new, the first thing you got to do is create a foundation and an okayness with what is. So the idea here is when you feel small, you want to move to awareness. When you're feeling small and unconscious and not much is changing, we want to create an awareness of what's going on. And when you have that awareness, you're going to notice that emotions are going. When your emotions are going, your job is not to create a vision. Your job is not to picture yourself as your ideal. Your job is to regulate those emotions, to really create space for those emotions and move toward acceptance. So you calm your body down and you move toward acceptance where you feel okay with what is. It is what it is. That's all you're saying. You don't love it. It's not going to stay that way forever, but it is what it is. And so we create room for that. Once we've gotten into a space of empowerment where we got our power back, then we'll move into vision. Then we'll move into creation and rewriting our story. And the biggest challenge that most people have is you've got to re-engage with that. So this is where discipline comes in and nurture comes in. So you re-engage with your creation. So you move from feeling small back to giant. You might do this a million times. Your old ways of being, like I said, they have gravity, so they might pull you back in and you'll feel small. When you find yourself doing that, no amount of judgment is going to help that. Grief is going to help you mourn what's not there, but it's meant to help you return to joy and learn and grow. Gratitude will help you move back into power. Acceptance helps you move back into power. And then once you're empowered, then we'll jump into the other journeys of growth. So the idea here is to find tools that help you to get your power back. So gratitude is one of those, very powerful. Comes from the root word guere, which means heavy. It's the ground where your dreams begin to grow. It's an appreciation for and a return to kindness. It's acknowledging the good that you already have in your life and is the foundation for all abundance. Some of the benefits of gratitude physiologically: you're more resilient to stress. It's associated with lower depression, lower blood pressure, prevention of heart disease. So you notice there are physiological benefits to gratitude. You have better sleep, increased life satisfaction, improved meaning and activity in life, and improved life outlook. You get a shot of dopamine with it and a swig of serotonin, right? These are the things that make you feel good and give you the drive to do something about your life. And so that's the power of gratitude. How often do you do it? Research suggests once a week is enough. As long as you're doing it with intention and feeling that it's as powerful as doing a daily practice. And so it doesn't matter how often you do this. You just want to express gratitude for your life, but it's hard to do that when you're in grief. It's hard to do that when you're in judgment. So when you notice you're in judgment, you want to move through the grief cycle, move into acceptance. Like, it's okay, I did that. If you had an unconscious behavior that you've been working on for years, if you say to yourself, I know better, I shouldn't be doing this anymore, then you moved into a space of judgment. When you notice you moved into a space of judgment, move to acceptance. It is what it is. I did that. And then move into gratitude. I'm grateful for what remains. I'm grateful for what is. I'm grateful it's not worse than it is. And that'll move you back physiologically. It'll get your body back. It'll get your power back. Okay. Empowerment, when we're disempowered, the journey of empowerment is to really get our power back, to gather it back into us, to stop putting it out here. Because when we get that back in, then we can start to vision. When you have that dysregulation, right? Working with heavy emotions, you're dysregulated, you're feeling depression, you're feeling anxiety. Your job is not to vision the world. Your job is not to look for abundance. Your job is not to look for ways to take yourself out of it. A lot of times it's about just managing the emotions and calming your body down. Carolyn Leaf, I got to pull, that's why I'm clicking here, is to remember her name, talks about breathing. She likes to do a breath where it's 3 seconds in and 7 seconds out. For me, cold showers do it. They help me out. We're trying to feel our emotions and not suppress them, right? Suppressing the feelings only makes it harder to let them go. Think about this. Expression of your emotions is the opposite of depression. When you express your emotions, it moves you out of depression. It brings you back into your power. I have people that I talk to. I have friends that I'll call. I have family members that I'll call. And that moves me back into my power. My job when I'm feeling depressed, my job when I feel anxious, my job when I feel scared is to get my power back. That's it. To survive the emotions, to move through the emotions, and to get my power back. And this program isn't about just teaching you coping tools to where you can just survive your whole life and learn how to cope with it better. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is create it so that when you get your power back, then we can move into vision. But it's hard to vision when you're feeling disempowered. So when you're feeling disempowered, get your power back. If your phone were dying, it's not going to work properly. I think of mine here. If it wasn't charged, I would pause and charge the phone before I'd use it again. If my car's out of gas, I wouldn't be pissed that it's out of gas. I would go get gas in the car so that I could use the car. I would do what needed to be done for that to be taken care of. And so that it creates this space for you to be okay working on you. It might take you years to master this, and that's okay too. So these stories that we have, they get expressed in our emotions. These thoughts that we have about the world get expressed in our emotions, and those emotions often affect how well we perform in our lives. A tool that you can use, you can tame your anxiety. You can tame your depression. You can name it, right? Give it a name. Be very gentle with it. The wild horse analogy is the idea that when you capture a wild horse, you're very gentle with it. You're very slow with it. You take time with it. You let it get to know you. You tame it, becomes your friend. How would it be in your life if you were friends with your anxiety? How would it be in your life if you were friends with your depression, that you were no longer afraid of it, but you noticed it as a tool, and you notice when it's present, there's something to work through, and you allow for it, and you allow those intense emotions to be there, and you work through them to get your power back. Be powerful. Glennon Doyle, she talks about this. She says, I didn't know before that woman told me that all feelings were for feeling. I didn't know that I was supposed to feel everything. I thought I was supposed to feel happy. How often are we taught that? We're supposed to feel happy. I thought that happy was for feeling, that pain was for fixing and numbing and deflecting and hiding and ignoring. I thought that when life got hard, it was because I had gone wrong somewhere. I thought that pain was weakness and that I was supposed to suck it up. But the thing was that the more I sucked it up, the more food and booze I had to suck down. I keep the note stuck to my bathroom mirror. Feel it all. Feel your emotions. Allow your emotions to be present. Don't chase them away. The thing with emotions is that they're designed to bypass the neural system. So all of those neurons that you have firing and those glial cells that you have firing, that's a slow process. When chemicals hit and emotions hit, it's instant. Because if we had to wait for you to think things through back in the times of saber-toothed tigers and more, you would have been dead. So chemicals get you to respond quickly. So often your chemicals will override your logic. And so you might know these things, but be overridden by your emotions. And so the more you can become aware that this might happen, you can allow for them. I like the analogy of riding in the bus. You're the driver of the bus. The emotions are passengers. If your emotions come up, if you engage with those emotions and you try and stop them, then you're no longer driving the bus. Now you're engaged with the emotions. You might wreck the bus. The idea here is that they have a ticket to be on the bus. They're allowed to be there. So we want to create room for them to be there. We don't want to chase them away. We don't want to ignore them. We want to allow for them. If we can learn from them, we want to learn from them. But the whole purpose is to get our power back. Sitting by the side of the river, not jumping in the river, right? But noticing the sounds of the river. If you jump in the river is going to carry you. Same with your emotions. You jump into the emotions, they're going to carry you. They're going to take you downstream. But if you can sit on the side of like a river, your emotions, just notice them. What do they feel like? It returns you to you. You become the observer again. You become empowered again. And when you have your full power back and that blood flow starts going again, then you get your logical part of your brain back. And then you can move into creation. Barry McDonough says, as strange as it sounds, the greatest obstacle to healing your anxiety is you. You're the cure. In essence, you must learn to get comfortable in your anxious discomfort. The secret to recovery, however, is that once you reach a point where you really allow and accept it, it begins to fall away and discharge naturally. So creating room for your emotions often is all you need. Creating room for it to be there is sometimes a cure for those emotions. I was diagnosed with anxiety disorder. I think it was 2017. I don't feel it anymore. I don't need that diagnosis. But I was to the point that I didn't have control over my emotions. Barry McDonough's book, Dare, is one of the most powerful books on anxiety and how to work with anxiety. And what I learned from him and from practice is that the more I could accept those emotions and allow for them and just notice them, the more they went away, the less power they had over me. I didn't have to chase them away. They just were what they were. Some other tools you might look at: ice therapy, cold water therapy, very powerful. Sense of smell. It's the only sense that you have that bypasses the thalamus. And so it goes directly into the brain. I keep essential oils close to me. Some of these are a gift from a friend of mine. And that smell is enough to get my brain back, to calm down. That's what I'm trying to do, is calm down and soothe my body. Grounding, putting my feet in the dirt. These are tools. Talking to a therapist, talking to a friend. These are tools. The whole goal here is to get your power back. And so when you move through the cycle, the root journeys here Our vision is to get our power back. When you're working within the root journeys, the only purpose you have at that point is to get your power back. And so as we move forward here, once you have your power, then we can move into growth. Then we can move into vision. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So I appreciate the comments. Julie, thank you. I think so too. I think oils are pretty amazing too. So we're going to move into uncertainty. A lot of people want certainty. They want certainty out here. Most explorers don't create certainty out here. They create certainty in here. They know they can count on this. Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who's a mathematician, he wrote the book The Black Swan, talks about certainty principles. There are no absolutes in the universe. There is no absolute certainty in the universe. He says there's a possibility if I were to set my coffee cup on the table, there is a possibility that the molecules in the coffee cup and the molecules in the table can jump in different directions, and that coffee cup would literally jump off the table. What I can count on is that's not going to happen. If I set it down, it's going to stay there. So there's a high probability that that won't happen, but it is possible. And so with certainty, what we're trying to get to is this idea that I can count on something, but we tend to put that accounting on something outside of us. I want to be able to count on the sun coming up or this person showing up. So all of our trust is in something outside of us, where in truth, that certainty should be pointed inward. When we're certain of ourselves, then we're able to move into our world, into the unknown. So the flow that I see in this is that when you have a thought, an inspiration, an idea, then you move into faith and action around it. So you're willing to test it and try it out. There's a lot of speculation, a lot of I don't know that goes on with that because you haven't had any experience with it. So as you practice, you start to gain certainty. You start to move away from the I don't knows and the speculation. You move toward a sense of certainty, and that's through testing and repetition. Well, a sense of certainty isn't certainty. A sense of certainty is like going to Vegas and putting a quarter in the slot machine and pulling the handle, winning the jackpot. You could say with a sense of certainty, every time I put a quarter in, I'm going to win the jackpot. But we know through testing that's not true. It's just a sense of certainty. And so if you're relying on a sense of certainty, you really don't have all the information, but you're relying on that as your truth. And we want to get beyond that. We either want to learn it from others who have gone through all the testing and the repetition to show that you can count on this thing happening. We call those skill sets, right? As you test things, you move towards certainty, and then you start to know things, and that becomes knowledge. And knowledge is what you draw from to create wisdom. So it becomes your truth. And you often teach from what you know. Many of us haven't tested. We teach from a sense of certainty. So you don't want to do that. You want to teach from what you know. And then that inspires somebody to go through the cycle for themselves. So with uncertainty, when people think of an unknown future, they get a little scared. And so they shut down. But uncertainty puts us in a space of knowing reality exactly as it is, and then seeing what's possible. So it's a space of possibility. When nothing is sure, everything is possible. So start embracing uncertainty. But it's hard to embrace uncertainty when you're disempowered. So remember that. So when you're disempowered, you don't want to jump into uncertainty or vision. You want to go back and do the journeys so that you can get your power back. Because when you get your power back and you look at uncertainty, then you see possibility. When you're disempowered, you don't. You see problems and challenges and fears. So when nothing is sure, everything is possible, but it's hard to see that from a disempowered state. So that's why we work through those first 6 journeys. Anytime you're feeling disempowered, we want to go back through those and get your power back, then look at the uncertainty and the possibility. At first, when you look into uncertainty, dreams seem impossible. Then as you work on them, they seem improbable. And then they move to inevitable. That's from Christopher Reeve. And that's the process we're going to go through. Nassim Nicholas Taleb says that we're empirical decision makers who hold that uncertainty as our discipline, that understanding how to act under conditions of incomplete information is the highest and most urgent human pursuit. We don't want to create certainty out here. What we want to do is create certainty here so that we can go into the unknown and create with it. We can go into the chaos and create with it. So our job is to get our certainty into us. I can count on me. I can count on me showing up. I can be disciplined in my creation. That's where we want the certainty. Most explorers work on themselves first. Most creators work on themselves first. You look at any billionaire out there today, and they do their internal work and let their creations express from that. That's what we're trying to do when it comes to certainty, not try and create certainty in our lives. That safety that we think we have in the world, we start to lean on that, and then we stop creating. And so this is your opportunity to really explore things and create possibility. As a kid, nothing is impossible. You can be anything, right? That's the idea with uncertainty. Then you move into abundance, the journey of abundance. Abundance comes from the word abound, abundar, means to overflow. The universe is abundant. It's our gift. Richard Paul Evans calls it the chaos. Chaos is the mind of creation. I'll probably come up on that slide here, get ahead of myself. But abundance is that all of the materials, all of the things, all of the people that we need to create with are already here and around us. Our job is to transform them from the form that they're in into the form that we have in mind, that we've envisioned. When you're in a disempowered state, all you see is scarcity. When you're in a disempowered state, there's not enough. So when you get empowered again, then you're able to see the resources that are available to you. It's like God gave us the keys to the playground, and now we get to play with it. All of the things that we want to play with and create with, all the Play-Doh like in kindergarten, is already around us. It's up to us to see it, tune into it, and then transform it from the form that it's in into something else. So abundance isn't something we go acquire. It's something that we tune into, right? It's the default nature of things. It's like this. Elon Musk didn't have to create Mars to go fly to Mars. He didn't have to create the materials to create the rocket ship. He had to transform them into the materials that could create a rocket ship, but they were already there. All he did is had a vision, took them from the form they were in, saw possibility, and started transforming those into something else. Again, if you're in a disempowered state and you're back in the root journeys and you're disempowered, it's going to be hard to see the abundance of the world. But nature is designed for abundance. All of the materials that you need are already there. All of the people that you need are already there. The challenge is when we're out of tune, we can't see it. Think about your body. You didn't have to create your body so that you could use it. This machine that we have that's so incredible, the 86 billion neurons, you just get to use those. 7,000 facial expressions, 500 megapixel eyes, incredible. 7 octillion atoms, 37 trillion cells, 100,000 miles of blood vessels. You didn't have to create that. It was organized and ready for you. You get to use it. The same holds true for abundance, but it's hard to see that from a disempowered state. So my job with a giant or as a giant is to get myself into an empowered state so that I can start to see this abundance and use it. You think about the sun, the sun burns a lot of energy. Only 1/1000th of its energy hits the earth, only 1/100000th, but it's enough to create everything that we see. And it's abundant. It's overflowing. The sun puts out so much energy. It's overflowing. We could never use all the energy that the sun puts out, but it continues to do it. It never stops. There's so much to give to the world. I love this. Chaos is the mind of creation. Abundance is already out there. All the stuff you need is already there. And that's what you use to create with. You pull from it, you reconstitute it, you transform it. And that becomes the foundation for everything you want in your life. It's like looking at these Legos. Some of you see painful feet. The idea here is that some of us are going to create a little box house. Other people are going to see this and they're going to create something like that. They have vision for it. Same materials, same possibility, but our vision affects what we create with it, and our empowered or disempowered state affects what we can see and what we can do. So the ability to take the resources that are available to us and transform them into anything we can imagine is abundance. We recognize that all that we need is already there. All the people we need, all the resources that we need are already there. And if something's limited, we'll find another way. But the truth is that it's really not unlimited. Our thoughts become limited. Our perceptions of the world become limited. So when we find that we're bumping up against our limited thoughts, then we want to move back and go through that work again. So we are creators. We take ideas, we speak them to the world. We take the materials that are there, we transform them, right? We create things. We confirm that we can do that, and we do it again and again and again. So the only thing that can get in the way is the story that we tell ourselves. There really are no limits to what we can create in this world. Lori, thank you for that. Some materials, same possibilities. Powerful. Pentacles are endless. So this moves us to vision. What do you want to create in your world? What are the visions that you have? I was told that when it comes to vision, that it's like being enamored. When you become enamored with it, in love with it, like you would another human being, and it's all you can think about, it consumes your thoughts and you just see it everywhere. Like I have my vision everywhere in my home. Then it becomes anchored in. Now you can attach to the feelings of it. In the book, I had the giant put the small on his shoulder and show him the vision of what's possible for him. And I'm not talking about just eyesight. I'm talking about how you imagine your world. It's something seen in the imagination or in the supernatural, from Anglo-French vision. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but hopefully. But it's the ability to imagine what it is that you want to create in the world. It's not only that, but we might see other people doing what we want to do and be able to see ourselves doing that too. We have what are called mirror neurons. When we see something in somebody else, we're able to duplicate that and fire the exact same neurons in our brain without doing the activity, by watching them do the activity. And now we've started to develop those neural pathways in ourselves. This is where mentors come in. They're very powerful. We can learn from others and what they've created in their way of being. Aphantasia, the inability to see images. Some people aren't able to see images with their vision. You don't have to envision it with images. It's however you imagine it, whatever way works for you. So we want to work with that. But it reaches beyond the thing that is. It reaches beyond our current reality. And imagination gives you a picture. Vision gives you the impulse to make that picture your own. So we're able to see beyond what is. Albert Einstein, let's go to this in just a second, imagines the most powerful word in the English language. And Einstein says that imagination is more important than knowledge, because what we know is, imagination lets us go beyond that. So we might say we know some things, but imagination puts us into a space of creating it differently, to moving beyond what is into what's possible. And then when we see what's possible, we move into the unknown. I don't know how I'm going to create it. I just know it's possible. Then we look at the abundance around us and we start to transform it. You want to create a vision so vividly that it becomes a memory of things yet to be. This is Catherine Lee. She was on Oprah 3 times. She envisioned herself there. Before it ever happened, she saw herself there. She had a memory of things yet to be, a pre-memory, right? If you look at this picture, you can imagine yourself being at peace in this picture. Imagine yourself there. You can put yourself in the environment, not describing how you got there, but just being there as though it's today, as though it's right now. That's how we want to talk about vision. It's a fascination. It's the ability to render one unable to resist, to attract and hold the attention of, from the Latin fascinatus. So our fixation to our vision, like I said, it consumes you. Like you could see it, you could feel it, you could smell it, taste it, touch it. You know it's yours. Because when you see that, we start to move into hope. And when you have hope, it's the belief that tomorrow will be better than today, and that you have the power to make it so. It's a fundamental element of our capacity to live life well. When you see your vision clearly, then you have hope. When you're in a disempowered state, when you look at your vision, you feel despair, which is the opposite of hope, non-hope, right? Esperar, to breathe into something. You don't feel that. And so when you're in a disempowered state, don't try and have hope in your vision. Get your power back. Does that make sense? You want to move back into your power. Then when you feel empowered, then move back to your vision. Then start to create that hope again. And then start to see your ability to create what it is you have in mind. Hope theory says that when we have goals, we will create pathways. And when there's an obstacle, we'll find a way around it. And we also believe that we have the agency or the power to create it. So when we have hope, we'll actually move towards something. When we feel despair, we won't. We'll go in the opposite direction. We won't even give it effort or energy. And so vision is important because it gives us hope. And hope gets us into action, because without it, we won't do anything. So this moves us to the journey of surrender. How are you going to do it? How are you going to go from your current reality to that vision? I don't know. I don't know how you're going to do it. This is where surrender comes in. This is where you raise the white flag on the how, the mechanics of it. You don't know how any more than I do. Your job is to act, right? Surrender comes from Old French to give back or give over to another. So it's to render over. Surrender is like a fish finding the current and going with it. Our dreams, our identities, our ambitions, our relationships, they're often cocoons that lead us to the next. We often think that I need to know where I'm going, and I also need to know clearly how I'm going to get there. We call that a goal. But you don't need to know how you're going to get there. What you need to know is that you can get there, that you have the ability to create it, that you have the abundance around you to create it, that you're willing to act on whatever comes, and you'll do your best to do your best each day, and that'll be enough. Sometimes we think we're not making progress, but each progression is like a cocoon. It allows us to evolve into the next thing. And we don't know how it works as far as the mechanics, right? Of a cocoon, a worm goes in and digests itself. It turns into mush and then turns into a butterfly. It leaves that old life behind, but without that old life, it wouldn't be what it is today. It's kind of like that for us. Our activities are good enough today. We do the best we can with what we have. We surrender it. We start looking for other possibilities, but sometimes our ego gets in the way. It says it's got to happen this way. So what I'm inviting you to do is to lay down your swords, like lay down the reasons of why it has to go a certain way. Lay down the sword of, not looking for other options or possibilities. Lay down those things because they get in the way. You're not surrendering. You're not rendering over to the way it needs to go. Surrender is simply allowing the path that needs to happen to emerge. And it will come through your activity. As you act on things, you'll start to have serendipitous events in your lives. You take the conditions away from it. You take the conditions away of how it needs to come about. Sometimes we say, well, if I only had this, then I could do that. And that becomes a condition of our creation. Remove those conditions. Just allow it to flow however it comes about, right? Steve Jobs says you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. So as you're looking forward, you might not know how to do it. So this is where the empowerment comes in. When you're in a disempowered state, it's hard to see possibilities. When you're in an empowered state, everything's a possibility. So you just start acting. The dots will connect as you act. You don't know the dots looking forward. You trust. It's like this tree. You'll branch out here. That may or may not work. You'll pull back. You'll go down another path. You'll do it again and again and again until you have a whole creation. And that's surrender, is allowing the path that needs to come about to emerge. Surrender is the simple but profound wisdom of yielding to rather than opposing the flow of life. Non-resistance doesn't mean not doing. All it means is that any doing becomes non-reactive. We're just not reactive to it. We're being surrender versus being control. And often control is a fear response, which moves us into nurture, right? Nurture is the power that we have to create. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It's the one most adaptable to change. So as we nurture, we're nurturing ourselves to go out into the unknown. We're nurturing ourselves to have the power to step into things that we just don't know if it's going to work or not, or we get with mentors who teach us how to take steps. And we start developing the skill set that we need to create our reality. So nurture is more about developing that mindset and adding to it the skill sets that you need to create the vision that you have. It means to raise up, bring up, foster, maintain, provide for. It's developing your capacity to grow into the thing that you're creating. Is the care and attention given to someone or something? You must nourish your garden like a mother, but you must protect it like a father. So all your opportunities, dreams, or simply the season of spring. So our nurture is us taking care of ourselves. Okay. You can nurture whatever you want, positive or negative, weeds or fruit. It's up to you. You're going to nurture in cycles. You're going to plant the seeds. You're going to nurture them, take care of them, grow them. You're going to earn and harvest them. You're going to get the fruits of your labors, your abilities. Remember to rest, take breaks, take pauses. Purpose comes from the word propose or pausar, to pause. It's a place of rest. It's like having a rest stop on your travels. We want to repeat simple steps. You want to do things and repeat them. As soon as you find something that works, you wash, rinse, and repeat. Benoit Mandelbrot says that bottomless wonders spring from simple rules which are repeated without end. We find it in nature. This is Romanoff broccoli. Simple steps repeated create complexity. Sic parvis magna. From small steps come great things. So as we plant and nurture our new skills, as they grow, our brain will support those, and then we'll start to do those automatically. It goes back to the unconsciousness, right? We'll create those as our new way of being, then we'll automate those, and that is who we are automatically. That's where we act from, that's where we create from. So our goal is to stick with it long enough to win. They say that in habit formation, it takes at least 63 days to create a new habit. It can take upwards of a year or more, depending on the type of habit. But you want to stick with it long enough, at least 63 days, to start creating those new ways of being. Just do little things. One thing for growth, one thing for maintenance, one thing for pruning. Just like nature, get rid of things. One thing for giving back. Do that every day. Grow in your integrity. Grow your current capacity. Fill the container and then get a bigger container. Don't get a huge container and try and fill it. Like, fill your current capacity. Walk, then step, then run. Crawl, walk, then run, right? Don't try and take on more than you can, because then you feel overwhelmed. So create yourself, grow in your capacity, and expand out. If you don't have the skill, go get the skill. Once you master that skill, go get another skill. And so just keep adding to it until you can accomplish the thing that you want to create in your life. If you think about bamboo, for 3 to 5 years, it grows underground. You can't see any growth above ground. And then once it breaks through the ground, it'll grow hundreds of feet within a few days or weeks. And so often you'll do all this work underneath, behind the scenes, that you're not seeing the progress. But if you stick with it, you'll start to see that growth that you're looking for in your creations. So this brings us to the final journey, the journey of legacy, the legacy journey, the fruit, the why, the reason why you're doing all this. It comes from the medieval Latin legatia or legatia, a gift by will, to give over. It's your way of giving back to the world. When you're in a position to have gotten so much, the gift at this point is giving back. And so it becomes your purpose. Why? Why are you doing all this? Why do you get up in the morning and do the work that you do internally so that you can create externally? This is your reason. Why do you want to do it? What you leave behind is not what is engraved in stone monuments, but what is woven into the lives of others. How do you want to serve the world? How do you want to give back? Giving is as effective on the body. It has the same impact on the body as food and sex. So there's actually a benefit to giving. So if you're feeling down and negative, go give something away. It has the same impact that food and sex do on your body, the endorphins. Be the wounded healer. Maybe you think that I can't go do anything because I'm not healed yet. Maybe I should heal myself first before I give back. But the thing with the wounded healer, the idea there is that people who are wounded that help others to heal tend to hold on to their healing longer. They tend to heal quicker. They tend to heal more completely. And so go be the wounded healer. Go serve the world. Pablo Picasso, the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away. That was his purpose. So my life is my message, Mahatma Gandhi. Let your life speak for you. Find mentors. Find people that want to give back to you from their learnings. Be a mentor to somebody else. Mentorship is huge. Oprah Winfrey has a mentor. She talks about it as someone who allows you to see the hope inside yourself. A mentor is someone who allows you to know that no matter how dark the night, in the morning will come. A mentor is someone who allows you to see the higher part of yourself when sometimes it becomes hidden to your own view. These 5 questions, these are powerful questions you can sit with. If you knew that 5 years from now, on this date, that this would be the day that you die, what would you do in between? Who would you be with? What's the point of your life? What legacy do you want to leave? And what really matters? When you discover this, you find out what it is that matters to you. You can feed that back through all the journeys. You can feed it into unconsciousness, awareness, grief, acceptance, gratitude, and empowerment. You can take it through the growth journeys of unconsciousness and abundance and vision and surrender and nurture. And your legacy is what you leave behind by will. It's what you're gifting to the world, your creations. It's your reason, your purpose, your why for everything. I put the symbolism of the X in the tree because where you are right now is exactly where you are. It's where you need to be. It's where you're going to grow from. It's where you're going to create from. So trying to get somewhere else isn't what we're trying to create here. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. You're right on time. You haven't lost any time. So when you start to create from here, we first want to focus on you and your internal work. Then we'll work on your vision. Then we'll pull in your legacy, and you'll do it again and again and again, perhaps for the rest of your life. My vision for you is that you're able to empower yourself in such a way that you're fully accountable for all the things that you create in your world. You start adding tools and resources to your life that help you to reach your potential. We're not creating you into a giant. We're exposing the giant that's already within you. So we're uncovering that. We're discovering it. All of the programs that we do, we have the upcoming SG group that's coming up in August 31st. For 8 weeks, we go through these 12 journeys in detail, and you full on live them. So they become who you are. They become ingrained in you. I would recommend that you look into that program. If you have questions, DM me about it, because we're only opening up 10 seats for that. So August 31st, I would recommend you do that. If you would like these taught to your groups, your friends, family, and you want them to hear the 12 journeys, I'd be happy to bring these in through keynote trainings, speakings, and coming into your group or organization and helping them to learn these tools so that more people are taking ownership of their lives and empowering themselves and envisioning a better world and creating that world and having more purpose in their lives, especially now where things are so difficult and uncertain in the outside world. Let's create that certainty in here. I appreciate you guys being with me on the 12 journeys here. These are the journeys that you'll go through as you create. You're going to go through the 6 root journeys, the 5 growth journeys, and then the legacy journey and get back to the world. You're welcome to reach out if you have any further questions. And I just want to honor your time and appreciate you for being here. Go make it a giant day. Talk to you soon.